Hello and welcome to Press TV's debate. I'm Marzieh Hashemi. Thanks so much for being with us. This country is the only one to have ever used nuclear weapons, and it spends more on nukes than all the other nuclear countries combined. Despite this, the United States President-elect Donald Trump says his country, the United States, must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes. Well, stay with us as we take a look at what exactly this may mean.
The U.S. president-elect has recently made two statements regarding the U.S. nuclear arsenal, which rang the alarm worldwide for the proponents of global disarmament. In the first statement, Trump said the U.S. must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability, quote, until the world comes to its senses. He made his second statement when he was asked to clarify his previous comment. This time, the president-elect simply said, quote, let it be an arms race, and that the U.S. will win it. It's unclear what has prompted him to make such remarks. A spokesman for Trump has said he aims to ensure that other countries such as Russia and China would not boost their nuclear capabilities. The incoming American president's latest controversial remarks came on the same day that Russian President Vladimir Putin said his country needed to boost its nuclear forces. The Russian president, however, later tried to play down Trump's pledge to upgrade the U.S. nukes, saying the president-elect's remarks were not out of line.
Regarding U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's comments, there is nothing new he was saying during his campaign about the importance of a strengthening the nuclear aspect of the United States, about the strengthening of military forces. There is nothing unusual.
The U.S. president-elect's response to a letter from Putin has also compounded the issue, prompting many to scratch their heads as to what Trump meant. In the letter, Putin calls for pragmatic and constructive bilateral ties. Trump says in response he hopes both countries will, quote, live up to those thoughts rather than having to travel an alternative path. It's now anyone's guess as to what Trump's policy on nuclear disarmament will look like. If he makes good on his promise to further expand America's nuclear arsenal, Russia will not sit and watch. There may even be a full-blown arms race similar to the one which goaded the two to rattle sabers during the tense climate of the Cold War era.
I'd like to welcome my guest to the program out of Atlanta, Managing Editor of Veterans Today, Mr. Jim W. Dean, and out of Washington, D.C., the founder of American Institute for Foreign Policy, Mr. Michael Lane. Welcome, both of you, to the program. Well, let's start this off in D.C. Michael Lane, what does it mean when the president-elect says, bring on the arms race?
Well, it can mean a lot of different things. I would count probably 20 different permutations as he elaborated on his original tweet regarding the status of nuclear arms in the world. It's impossible to decipher completely exactly what President-elect Trump is speaking about. It's impossible to decipher who his target audience is. But I would speculate that his overall message goes to virtually everyone who's a member of the nuclear club or who aspires to be a member of the nuclear club. And his message has been that he is not going to be a status quo kind of guy. He's not going to sit around and let nuclear weapons proliferate the way it's happened in previous years. And that the United States, he's holding out the possibility that the United States will, quote, greatly expand its capabilities. But greatly expand can mean any number of things. It can mean modernization, which President Obama has already committed the United States to, or it can mean an increase in the number of warheads, or it can be an increase in the deployment of warheads, or it can be an increase in the methods of delivery of said warheads. I think it's a warning shot over the bow of the nuclear world that the United States is going to take an active role in this, and that Donald Trump is not going to be an idle diplomat and watch proliferation take place.
Okay, and Jim W. Dean, your take. Is Trump beating the drums of war? Does he want a confrontation, or was it a publicity ploy?
Well, you bring up a very good point because there's really kind of two Donald Trumps at play here. One of them, potentially at least, which has his staff worried, is that we're going to have Mr. Donald Trump shoot from the hip, or he might, if he keeps doing this, he's going to have the nickname President Tweet. Everyone was really shocked that a major statement on nuclear policy like this would be put out over a tweet. I mean, it really trivializes the subject. You really can't discuss it in a tweet battle, and yet that's what he did. But you could tell that his tone was cowboy style, kind of like bring it on. And a lot of that is playing to Trump's could be one of his weaknesses, is narcissism. That is, he always wants the attention on him, even if he's saying something foolish, so that the media will be discussing for several days what is it that he really meant, because that's taking the media focus off other issues or opponents, getting their views out. And then the other aspect of this is that he's doing this in a calculated way, that he is saying different things, and he's leaving the definitions vague because he wants to keep opponents and possibly friends like Europe and NATO also guessing what it is that he really is going to do. It's just kind of a way of softening them up for when he gets to the negotiating table. So we really don't know at this stage. But we're really looking at a situation. I know the Russians are feeling very comfortable with him, although with measured response. But we have all indications here we're dealing with a loose cannon presidency. And we're now going to have to see whether his staff has any ability to rein him in, because I remember his key staff person had said that she'd gotten a promise from him that he would stop tweeting once he became president. So we'll have to see if that's the case.
Okay, well, Michael Lane, what do you think that Trump means by strengthening the U.S. nuclear capacity until the world comes to its senses? Of course, I know that you're not Donald Trump, but we're looking at possibilities here. How do you evaluate that part of the statement?
Well, the world comes to its senses could mean any number of things. Again, I think that President-elect Trump was intentionally vague here. Look, there's a lexicon, there's a dictionary of nuclear terms that has been developed over years to reduce ambiguity, to make sure that everyone knows precisely what you're talking about and what your bottom line is, and so there's no miscalculations and things like that. I think Donald Trump has intentionally thrown that out. The last time United States nuclear policy was restated was, I think, 2009, when it took a 64-page document for President Obama to come out with a new statement. Now, President Trump does it in 140 characters. I think, you know, what he's saying is that he doesn't, I agree with my colleague's possibility assessment, which is that Donald Trump is going to bring back cowboy diplomacy, which is not to say that he's a wild, reckless, unpredictable cowboy, but he is very, very comfortable with the rest of the world thinking that he is a wild, reckless cowboy.
Does that concern you? Does that concern you as an American citizen, Mr. Lane, or are you encouraged by that type of tactic?
Look, the last two presidents that could be called cowboy diplomats in the United States were very successful in their foreign policy. Back in the 1969 to 1974, Richard Nixon never revealed his cards, never let anybody know what his bottom line was. He was generally considered to be a more effective foreign policy president than a domestic policy president. And then most recently in the 1980s, of course, Ronald Reagan was accused of being a reckless cowboy his entire administration, and his foreign policy record is fairly successful. So I think that Donald Trump is doing his best to cast himself in that particular light. So no one knows what his bottom line is. He's a a master negotiator. This is the way he's run his businesses for 40 years. And if no one knows what your bottom line is, then they can't go to it. I think he criticized frequently President Obama for always telegraphing what our bottom line was. And that, of course, became a ceiling that we needed to negotiate down from. I think Donald Trump's trying to recast the entire diplomatic effort. And at this point, I'm not concerned. We'll see what the future brings.
What about that, Mr. Dean? Could it just be a diplomatic technique, or are we really going down the road of the Old West?
Yes and no. And again, I'll get back to you can use that on some policy matters, but on nuclear things, that is not a good strategy, because you may want to have your enemies and adversaries potentially guessing what you want to do, but you don't want to have your allies wondering what it is that you really want to do. And that's what he's done here. And something else I'd like to add to the discussion in terms of framing is we find what's all the articles I read today, the mass media never mentions the little detail that's sitting over all of this, is it's not the U.S. is the only country that has an official first strike policy now. Russia does not. The U.S., under the Carter administration, with the neocons preparing this for them, has a policy where rather than only using a first strike in the case of an imminent threat, we now have a case where it's broadened to the maximum. It basically says that the U.S. reserves the right to strike first against any country that may be a threat to it at some time in the future. And that is about as blank check a description to be able to strike anyone anytime you want for whatever you feel like. And there really has been very little attention to this. And then part two to that, while we're all thinking about these hypersonic glide bomb ICBMs, the main nuclear threat that we're really all under now are mini nukes, because they're going to refarm all of the old plutonium, put them in mini nukes that can be put on these hypersonic cruise missiles. You have a fighter plane now that can carry 2 cruise missiles and carry the destructive power that a fully loaded B-2 can. And these are weapons that can take out a target with one hit, and you have a lot of them. They're inexpensive.
Well, to be fair to Donald Trump, this isn't something new, though, is it, Mr. Dean? This is a continuation of the policy, the strike first policy, though perhaps on the surface, Obama, for example, was talking about cutting back on the nukes. But actually, he definitely went for that first strike policy. So I guess the main question is, really, are things that different? Is Donald Trump so different from other presidents that we have seen? Or is it just a dialogue that he's using that is a little different, but the reality is actually the same?
The dialogue's actually different when you say basically North Korea and Japan may need to have their own nuclear weapons. He can't really say that he's backing up nuclear non-proliferation. And then even, I think, mentioned Saudi Arabia, and I don't know if anybody's briefed them yet, but Saudi Arabia has had tactical nuclear weapons for some time. So a lot of this is kind of for show to the public. Because, and Putin mentioned this one time, these small mini nukes that are clean, they don't have long-term radiation, they really lower the threshold of nuclear weapons being used. And Putin thought that this was a really destabilizing type situation, which a lot of us in the defense industry realize.
Okay.
Because all of the field commanders want these mini nukes because they'll want to use them in a tactical advantage for preemptive strikes.
All right, stay with me. Let me get Mr. Lane back in on this discussion. Speaking of Russian President Vladimir Putin, he's actually downplayed Trump's comments regarding the arms race and actually thinks that there will be a thawing in relations between Moscow and Washington when the new president takes the reins. Your perspective on this?
Well, on most other issues, it appears that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are going to attempt to improve U.S.-Russia relations, that they're going to cooperate on more things, they're going to get along, they're going to find areas of common rather than areas of conflict. I wouldn't discount, though, the fact that the Trump tweet came out mere hours after Vladimir Putin referenced the upgrade of the Russian nuclear capabilities in a speech. And I think that this can be interpreted, because of the timing, as a reaction to that speech, perhaps the beginning of a dialogue. The Trump administration is fond of initiating dialogue through tweets, but also expanding it as long as the opportunity was on the table to dialogue with President Putin, to also send a message to the rest of the world that things were going to be approached differently in a Trump administration. So President Putin, of course, downplayed the potential conflict because I don't think he wants to upset the opportunity for cooperation between Russia and the United States in those areas where President-elect Trump has signaled that he is willing to cooperate, particularly in fighting terrorism, et cetera, with the Russian government. So it may be that that it was a quick signal to Putin that he was taking one step too far, or it might not have been. I mean, it was such an inspecific tweet that you could take. On one hand, you could say really all he was doing was, in different words, restating Obama's policies, which is that we're going to completely upgrade our entire or modernize our entire capability. Or you could, on the other hand, say, you know, this guy's trying to start a nuclear war. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And in typical Donald Trump negotiating fashion, he's not going to tell us where he really is until he gets to the negotiating table, and probably not even then.
Well, Jim W. Dean, talking about Vladimir Putin, it seems that, for lack of a better word, that he has really taken the mature side of things, not only with Trump, also with Obama, and reacting to various issues. How do you see this situation coming up? Do you expect the relations to get close as far as Moscow and Washington, or not under Donald Trump?
Well, I think I expect them to be closer because they're going to have more man-to-man conversations. Trump likes to deal that way. Putin's very good that way. And of course, as you said, Mr. Putin is Mr. Cool when it comes to any kind of pressure. He doesn't get excited. And of course, the Russians never overplay their hands. They never sell themselves. But Mr. Lane made a good point, is we're going to have to see whether Trump really has some intentions of changing policies. And one of the things that we would see if that started to evolve is if Trump put in play that we understand that moving NATO up to your borders is really a very aggressive move on our part. And I'm willing to maybe pull those things back to their original positions. But would you, Mr. Trump, not deploy this new type of ICBM with the glide bomb hypersonic 10 warhead missiles on them, which we consider a threat to us? Once you hear them starting to put on the table a trade-off like that, now you know that they're really interested in looking at a shift in policy.
And what about that, Mr. Lane? How do you see 2017? Compare it to a possibility, of course, it would have been a Clinton administration. You're going to have a Trump administration. Do you think the chances of war are more or less will be under the new Trump administration?
Oh, I think the chances of war per se are about the same. I think neither Barack Obama nor Donald Trump wants to get involved in any military conflict. You know, I mean, that's just a bridge too far for them to pursue. But you know, again, the difference in the approach here is that Donald Trump always criticized Barack Obama for telegraphing specifically in advance what our bottom line objectives were, and then that became the ceiling that we had to negotiate down from. I think that Donald Trump's business experience teaches him that you wind up getting a better deal for yourself if you don't telegraph what your bottom line is, if you keep your adversary guessing, if you essentially just approach it without revealing anything, and then negotiate hard all the time, letting your adversary think maybe, well, this guy, he might do something. So we'll see how it comes, but I don't think war per se is a real possibility in the immediate future.
And your prognosis, Jim W. Dean, 2017, do you think that at least this year, 2017, under Donald Trump, are you optimistic, especially when you look at perhaps better relations with Russia and others? How do you see it overall?
We see a hope for it, which we did not have with Mr. Obama, because he made no moves to try to change the policy, even though the sanctions weren't working. All this move to Russia had them speed up the modernization of their military and their nuclear force. They're much, much stronger militarily than they were 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. So any advantage they hope to get has been just completely eliminated because they're stronger now than they were before. But those of us who sat through the Cold War, one of the things that we're always concerned about is not war because people want it, but war because of a miscalculation, and even now so because of a false flag situation where some other third player is able to arrange an attack on someone and make it look like another party did it, which requires them to retaliate.
All right. And unfortunately, we're out of time. I appreciate both of you being with us out of Atlanta. Mr. Jim W. Dean, Managing Editor, Veterans Today out of Washington, D.C. Founder, American Institute for Foreign Policy, Mr. Michael Lane. And as always, viewers, we appreciate you being with us for another debate. I'm Marzieh Hashemi, signing off for myself and all the crew right here in Tehran. Goodbye and see you next time.